Sorry for the first question I have for you on the MILEX 26 and the environment and the behind the exercise. MILEX has existed for more than 2 decades now, and the exercise has changed fundamentally in character over the recent years. What makes MILEX 26 fundamentally different when it comes to the preceding editions of the former ones, and which specific capability or procedure do you want to be able to mark as really validated this year?
I think that all previous MILEXs were important and served their goal, but what we see is that the rapid deployment capacity, which is FOC, full operational capable, since the 1st of January, is more taken seriously by the member states. The world is changing, and the possibility of a possible deployment is raising. So I would say what makes it different is that we are taking it even more serious than we did in the past.
Okay. So, and when you take into account the outcome of the exercise, what do you think that is the most important message that could come out of this exercise?
Well, the most important message should be that it confirms that the MPCC is ready to conduct command and control, and that the EUPG, this time led by the Spanish authorities, is ready to be deployed.
Okay. So, yeah, talking about the dual role that you have in this very important environment, you hold the 2 functions simultaneously, the DG EUMS and the Director of the MPCC, and in the context of the MILEX 26, you are at the same time responsible for strategic direction and serving as the officer conducting the exercise, right? So at Finabel, we discussed with our land force commanders how that institutional dual role is experienced in practice by participating nations. But how do you manage the tension between the observer role, the examiner, and the commander? And do you see a structural solution for that dual position at the MPCC matures or not?
Well, to be honest, I don't feel any tension.
Okay.
I only see that this is currently the only way to fix it, because both the EUMS and the MPCC are still under-resourced. So we are slightly moving from political wish into political will, and I see that member states are more and more willing to pay the bill. And the bill means that we need more people, fill the posts, have more CIS available, and also infrastructure. And currently, the only way to run the show is to be double-headed, to be more flexible, to set main efforts with my personnel and other available resources. For the future, it depends on the developments in the EU. And we could come to that later on, but it depends on how the C2 will develop in the oncoming years. If the situation stays like this, or that we get a different structure.
Okay. At this moment, the level of ambition of the both sides, how would you define that?
What do you mean with both sides?
On the side of the EUMS and the side of the MPCC?
Well, there's no competing ambition, because the EUMS is the primary source of military knowledge in the EU. It's about concepts, it's about capability requirements, it's about supporting the External Action Service and the political leadership in the development of possible operations, but also strategic reviews of operations and missions, logistics, military mobility, where the MPCC is the planning and conduct capability that after the decision has taken to deploy, they plan and conduct the mission. So it's not a competition, but it's complementary to each other.
Okay. When it comes to the level of ambition at the level of the EUMS, taking into account that European battle groups shifted in the structure as they were shortly after the strategic compass in 2022, how do you see this developing for the future?
Well, that depends on the member states. Currently, we try to fulfill the current ambition, the current level of ambition, which is laid down in the headline goal process, which is laid down in the strategic compass, but recently also in the white paper, the preparedness union strategy, the preparedness union strategy and the resilience part of that. And we will see this summer probably a European security strategy that will be born, I would say.
Okay.
So there are a lot of developments that could lead to the adaptation of the level of ambition. When you look at the current level of ambition, we are ready to prepare and deploy the rapid deployment capacity. With the core, the EUPG, we are ready to command and control missions, like training missions and assistance missions, and we are ready to support the operations that are run by the national operational headquarters. For the future, I envision that this will be pulled into one headquarters. At least that is what I would like to see. One military strategic headquarters located in Brussels that would be able to plan and conduct missions and operations, that would be the preferred headquarters to lead a possible rapid deployment capacity operation. And next to that, that would be able to support to the defense of Europe and to play its role in the supporting role towards the civilians when it comes to the preparedness and the resilience. So I have a lot of ambitions, and we're working on that currently, and let's see if the member states could agree to that.
Okay, very good. Well, when it comes to the Finabel, let me say, core actions that we are taking inside of the Land Force Commanders organization, we are looking a lot at increasing interoperability amongst the member states. Of course, not only at the NATO, but also at the EU level, we have some, let me say, bilateral initiatives where we see that, for example, the Netherlands and Germany, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, have those kind of small, ambitious projects that are built on interoperability by design. When it comes to the EUMS, maybe also looking at more broader the EDA or the European Defence Fund that is included there, and also the projects at European level. How do you see this evolving when it comes to interoperability, and what role is MILEX playing there to test or to validate this kind of interoperability? What's your position on that?
Well, I don't have to explain to you that interoperability is a very broad theme. It's about language, doctrine, tactics, but also equipment, spare parts, maintenance, CIS. Many times people only concentrate on CIS, but I think we should look at the whole package. And you're right, we should not be in competition with NATO. So NATO standards are the core of the interoperability business from my point of view. It also makes sense in the EU because out of 27 member states, we have 23 that are also a member of NATO. So we are not looking for double standards. Secondly, I think that we are in a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to enhance our interoperability. Because what is going on in the world, the pressure coming from not only the conflicts in the East with Russia attacking Ukraine, in the Middle East, but also, let's say, pressure coming from the US to do more, leads to a situation where you see a lot of initiatives where the EU wants to be more autonomous. And this is reflected in strategies resourced by a lot of money to enhance the defense industry, to be more independent, and I would say to buy the same stuff. And that could lead to a situation that we have a stronger armed forces in the EU. Secondly, that if member states want to do it, we buy more the same, which would solve a lot of problems. It would solve the CIS problem, It would solve the problem of ammunition, spare parts, fuel, etc., etc. So if we take this serious, we take this once in a lifetime opportunity because it's making us less dependent on others. And secondly, more important effect is that the operational commanders and the tactical commanders will have an easier life because now they will have forces coming from multiple member states that would be able to seamless connect. And you know, national operations, from my point of view, are the past. Currently, we see that it's always multinational by default. So there is an interest to do so. Now, the challenge is that all member states agree. And then there always is a but. So yes, we want to go for one frigate or one plane or one tank, but it needs to be developed in member states X or member states Zulu. And here I would say no pain, no gain. To gain something, you need to give up something. And you will get something in return. So as long as it is, yes, we want to work together, but member state first, this problem will not be solved. And it starts with the CHOTS, it starts with the chiefs of defense, the army commanders, that say, yes, what is good enough for example, Germany, is good enough for the Netherlands. Or what is good enough for Spain, is good enough for. Now, to finalize this, my remark here, I don't believe that we will get this standard immediately at 27. So I always say, let's grow small and end big. So big ambition, but start with groups of member states that work closer together, that naturally work together from a history, geography, culture, etc. And then you grow towards, let's say, one united and interoperable EU.
Mhm. When you just spoke about the level of ambition when it comes to the military environment, I think also in my position, talking to land force commanders often, think that at the military side there is a lot of motivation and willingness to go more European in a way that not only on the collaboration side, but also on the side of the developing of the capabilities. But at the other side, we see often, like you just mentioned, the political, economical side,
Sure.
where always the national interests of the industry is still bottlenecking often the way how interoperability should be built by design. And at the other side, what we also see is often that at the military part, is that a lot of military leaders still have this kind of thoughts that when they buy equipment, it should be tailor-made and not off the shelf. And that's an echo that I often heard when I speak to the industry. They're always saying, hey, listen, we have a catalog. Why are you always writing requirements that goes away from the catalog? It is more expensive, it is more tailor-made, so the interoperability is not that easy. Do you see mechanisms how we could eventually improve that?
Well, I have the feeling that this awareness is growing more and more.
Mm-hmm.
That we have seen in the recent decennia during deployments, the disadvantage of small changes with high impact. That we have seen in the support to Ukraine now, how the Ukrainians are struggling with this. Because there is no piece the same that they receive. So we see in practice what the lack of interoperability means. So I have the impression that we are learning from that. And on the military side of the house, everybody should agree that it's better to have one type that is completely interoperable than sub-optimize per army or armed forces.
Mm-hmm.
And the mechanism should be that I think when military commanders, who are, let's say, the ones who are putting forward the requirements, agree on a package of requirements, then this problem could be solved.
Yes.
So you have to invest more upfront
Mm-hmm.
and not after the development of a weapon system or whatever equipment.
Yeah.
And it also means that it requires an intense relationship between the industry and the army commanders, which also means that we need to find different ways to work with them and they with us. And I would say the motto should be dare to share from the beginning, both from the army commanders and from industry. One team, one mission, otherwise we will not get there.
That's a nice message to bring, of course. And yeah, what we see there often is the multicultural. Surely, when I was visiting one of the Center of Excellences, they said that when a terrorist organization is developing an IED device and this device is set up and is very effective, they directly will share the architecture of this device broadly inside of the terrorist organizations. When, for example, NATO discovers the way how this EAD is built, they put a NATO secret seal on it. So how can we win this war, right? So I think, yeah, dare to share, that's something that is really important in the cultural change to be a little bit ahead of what's ongoing.
Well, you need to change it because to be able to act at the speed of relevance, you need to get into that cycle. And if you are struggling with your processes, procedures, rules and regulations, that doesn't allow you to get into that cycle, you will always lose. And you mentioned IED and counter IED, which of course many of us have experienced, for example, in Afghanistan, but currently it's the same with the drones. So we see that the cycle of innovation is getting shorter and shorter. So you cannot be limited by too many rules and regulations. And let's not forget, security is not always guaranteed by putting a stamp of secret on it. Security is guaranteed by being inside the cycle. And so dare to share is, I think, very important. Of course, in a smart way, because some things you don't want to share with your enemy. But amongst member states and within NATO, amongst allies, it should be more easy and more faster.
When we take a look at the technology, as you mentioned, drones and the way how drones are developing and changing, I spoke with the Ukraine Land Force commander. He was telling me, listen, what we develop today as a counter-drone measure, tomorrow is no longer valid because there's an adaptation at the other side, which is really quick. And so this is a vulnerability as such. But at the other side, we see also that inside of the military environment, procurement procedures are bottlenecking a lot of this kind of capabilities. And how do you see this at the level of your ambition of the EUMS and also in the implementation of this inside of the member states, European member states? We see that procurement procedures are really slow or really heavy. Of course, there's something behind it, why they are so heavy and slow, but yeah, a lot of commanders telling me that this is often bottlenecking the fact that you're buying a device, and once you are through the procedure of procurement, it is already obsolete. So how do you see this?
Well, I think it's not black and white. So first of all, I would say many times we want to hurry up just because we started too late. So procedures, process and procedure are not a bad thing per se, especially when it comes to taxpayers' money. So don't tell me to hurry up if you just got out of bed at 9 o'clock in the morning, where you should have got out of bed at 7. So that would be my first message. Secondly, despite that, the processes, procedures, both nationally and on EU level, are many times developed for peacetime and not for crisis, conflict, or wartime. So there are some good examples where the European Commission now makes an omnibus, which gives more space for both national authorities and the industry to be more flexible in the use of process and procedures to speed up, because everybody knows that we need to speed up. So it's everybody should pull on the same side of the string, I think the end users should start early with everything, and the politicians and the institutions should enable the procurement in time. The industry also plays an important role, because currently industry is always saying we want to have safeguards. But my message is, whatever you produce, you will sell it. So currently, so don't ask about safeguards all the time. So it's a complex issue, but you can make it simple. What do you need? Start in time, one team, one mission, dare to share, and at the same time accept also that sometimes people, for example, will buy something outside that system. Because we have two different things. The one is to be prepared for the future, but also we need to be prepared for the fight tonight, which also drives some member states to buy equipment outside the EU because it's available. And I do understand. But then still we need to be smart, because if we buy stuff where we know upfront that it will never be interoperable, or where it will fix us for the next 30 or 40 years, that would be not so smart. So be prepared for now and for the future, more cooperation, less rules and regulations, and start early.
Okay. That's good advice, I think, yeah. When it comes to the political dimension of decision making and the unanimity requirements, the EU RDC was declared operational last year, but the decision to deploy requires unanimity amongst all member states. And in our research environment at Finabel, we raised this question with the Land Force Commander also in a candid setting. And how realistic is rapid deployment when the political decision-making process does not exercise alongside the military machine? And MILEX 26 trains the military instrument, but the political trigger remains outside of the scenario. And how do you view that tension between the military readiness at one side and the political decision-making at the other side? And do you see ways to bring those two into a closer alignment?
Well, I'll leave the political decision-making process and development to the politicians. But for sure, it doesn't make sense to have forces on high readiness with a notice to move that is shorter than the political decision-making process would take in time. That would be a very expensive solution, which doesn't bring much. So I know that here amongst the member states, everybody knows that they have to work on making decisions at the speed of relevance, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to have high readiness forces. And at the same time, with respect to member states' positions. So the advantage of a multilateral organization like the EU, but also NATO, is at the same time the disadvantage. So the strength of your deployment is dictated partly by the message that you take a decision at 27 or at NATO at 32. But the weakness is that you can have one member state blocking the decision making. Now we have seen in the past that we can decide quickly once we start to support Ukraine through our assistance mission EUMS, for example, or once we decided to deploy the operation Aspides in the Red Sea. So it gives me confidence that if the pressure is high and it's a shared understanding, that we can be fast. At the same time, I know that there are member states that would like to have a discussion on qualified majority voting in order to prevent that an important deployment could be blocked by one single member state. But again, I would always prefer, if at the speed of relevance, a decision at 27, because it's a strong decision, it's not excluding anybody, it's not only deploying the force, but it's showing 28 flags, 27 member states in the European flag. And that is the best combination of political will and the deployment of military force.
When it comes to the relationship with NATO and the EU, as we as we just discussed a little bit, MILEX 26 is explicitly positioned as an autonomous EU exercise without reliance on NATO structures as such. And the first LIVEX in 2023 was historic precisely because it was the first time that the EU exercised without leaning on the NATO framework. As we see the geostrategical and the political situation as is, with also the messages coming from the US, like some weeks ago when they were stating that they were going to take 4,000 troops out of Poland, and 1 week later announcing that they're going to provide 5,000 more in Poland. We see that in this environment, let me say, that there is more need on EU autonomy as a whole. And of course, in a MILEX environment as an exercise, it is nice to have this environment to test it. But how do you maintain coherence between those two worlds? And what is, in your view, the ideal balance between EU autonomy at one side and the NATO complementarity in the domains of exercising and readiness when it comes to MILEX 26, for example?
Well, let me state first of all that the mil cooperation between NATO and EU is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talk to each other on a weekly basis, we exchange, but we have some limitations because we are not allowed to exchange secret information. And this is a political issue, not a military issue. And I always say this has to be solved by the politicians. We cannot solve it. Now this is a given. Secondly, MILEX and RDC is for CSDP mission operations, not for collective defense. So NATO is mainly concentrating on collective defense, while we currently are concentrating on CSDP mission operations as an instrumental part of how to keep our citizens safe and secure. And this combination is essential. That's why we're looking now at the possibilities how we could support NATO in the defense of Europe, especially in the framework of military mobility, in the framework of coordinating when it comes to medical facilities, technical arrangement, these kind of things. So I think that is a good development. Nobody in the EU thinks about that we would be responsible on our own without any support for the defense of EU when it comes to the Article 5-like scenario. But it's important that we step up our efforts. Because whatever you think about how the Americans are communicating with us, one thing is for sure, we have been underspending much too long. So they are fully right when they say you need to do more. Mm-hmm. And I think the more European NATO is an important one, going from burden sharing to burden shifting. So I support that thought. Yeah. So the Europeans need to do more in NATO. By the way, Europeans is more than EU. And we're also talking about Turkey, we're talking about Norway, we're talking about the UK. And that's also very important to understand. I think NATO is the framework for collective defense. It needs to be more European. I think the conventional part of NATO should be done mainly by the Europeans. And the US coverage of the nuclear part is very important. Then as EU, we need to be able to conduct our CSD mission operations on our own. Currently, we are still also there working with partners. So we need to step up when it comes to command and control, when it comes to certain strategic enablers. And when it comes to exercising with NATO, we once in a while do, but there are some constraints based on political issues. Now, I think you can do one without leaving the other. So we are moving on the military side. We try to do as much as possible together with NATO. We are not looking for duplication, but I always say what we need to do is have some more redundancy. You cannot say that you have zero duplication if you want to be more self-sustaining as EU in your CSDP mission operations and your support to the defense of Europe. And at the same time, don't extend your capacities. But you need to limit it to a minimum, and that's what I call redundancy. And that is an investment that we can allow ourselves and we should make. But again, that's up to the member states in the oncoming months and years.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much for this very insightful information. At the end of this podcast, is there something that you, as a final thought, would like to share with our followers and our listeners?
Well, I think we touched on it earlier, but for me it's important that we realize, as the military leaders, that we all the time have to talk to our political leaders and to explain our needs, and also to press on that we have to move from wish to will. Because we know that you cannot be successful in a CSDP mission operation with nice policy papers, but we need the forces and we need to have interoperable forces. And there's only one way to get there, is to have a maximum of cooperation. Dare to share with information, but also with our concepts and with the way we work together. I think that's important. And we know, but I think we underestimate that we do not put enough effort in the communication, the explanation with our political leaders.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you very much, General, for the insights and for having us here and for your time to discuss these very important points for the future of Europe, for the future of the alliance, and also, of course, for the peace of our civilians and citizens. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.